economist and advisor to the Greek government, on the line from Athens. Elena, welcome. I just wanted you to kind of give me your interpretation and views on a story that broke in the papers across Europe, that there's been a failure to agree a sort of economic package to support the economies that are particularly affected by the COVID-19, the coronavirus. What's your view on this?
Well, I'm not surprised at all. To me, it's business as usual with the European with the Eurozone. And frankly, no matter how much we try to use the words, we don't know how to walk the walk. We don't really know how to talk the talk, right? We talk about solidarity, but we do very little about it, and very late, as a matter of fact. So the difference now between the European Union or the Eurozone, the Euro body, the body that holds the Euro as a currency, versus other countries such as the UK, where you're sitting, or the US, where I have been and I came from. They can increase their money supply and the velocity as much as they can because they are sovereign to their own currency. In the case of the Eurozone, we have had a Euro crisis, a global crisis that initiated in 2008, a Euro crisis that started in 2010, an exacerbated crisis of some of the countries of Europe, such as Greece, Italy, partly Spain, Malta, Ireland, Cyprus, that a lot of these leftovers, a lot of the leftovers of this crisis have been very weak state-managed infrastructures, such as the health system. Italy has been one of the countries that has suffered the most. And Northern Italy also, it's a very interesting case. Its ICU units is operating in the wintertime almost at full capacity at 98%. So just an additional little something, which this time it wasn't a little something, it was like a huge infection of coronavirus, just threw them off the cliff. Yeah. So you can blame anybody and everybody by saying, oh, you didn't start early, the measures of self-isolation and so on and so forth. But you know what? This is a virus it's a virus. I mean, it's a new thing. No one knew and knows even today the behavior of that virus, the mutation of that virus. And it's unfortunate that we are starting with countries that have already a very high debt to GDP ratio.
And that's the crucial point.
135.
Yeah.
Italy has 135% of GDP. France has close to a little bit over 100. I mean, we're talking about a series of countries that have a high level of debt to GDP. And quantitative easing that is already happening from the ECB has reached its limits because of its regulatory, its legal infrastructure, right? And so they cannot continue. They're going to break their backs by having basically 180% of GDP. Greece, that has right now 180% of GDP debt to start with before the coronavirus, it's very possible it's going to run over 200. Wow. So we're having huge debts. We're going to run huge debts, and we're going to run huge deficits. The same thing applies also for the UK. The same thing will apply for the United States. The difference is that they neutralize their debts in the US. Imagine that in the US, the Federal Reserve is actually purchasing corporate bonds right now. Yes, indeed. I mean, we've seen unprecedented ways by which the state and the regulatory environment, the regulatory infrastructure of the money, of the economy, is trying to be flexible to handle such an extraordinary crisis, which is in such a short period of time generating a big dip in the economy. And in Europe, we see nothing. We just see some additional QE, which is very, very minimal. It has incorporated Greece. Greece should not be part of the QE, presumably because of its rating, is junk rated. But it does get involved now. It does get part of the QE, but it's not enough.
Yeah.
So if you ask me, are you surprised? No, I'm not surprised. As a matter of fact, I think I'm rather surprised that we keep on asking for the same old question, you know, will you be willing to provide a Eurobond?
Yeah. And in terms of Germany said that they will be backing the use of the 410 billion euros in the European Stability Mechanism, the ESM, as kind of to provide emergency credit lines to the countries that are particularly affected by the
as a sovereign debt of each specific country.
Yeah. So what does that mean?
With attachment of austerity conditionalities,
right? Okay.
So that, how solidary is that?
Yeah.
It's like telling you here in the UK, we will give you all, payment for the next 60 days because you lost your jobs, or you will lose your jobs, right? Or because your employees are not earning anything to be able to pay you. So we're helping both. But we would like you to pay us back with a high percentage of interest rate.
Yeah. Well, Conte from Italy, the prime minister, said to other EU leaders, don't bother, you can keep it. He was so annoyed by the whole Troika's preconditions that the bailout, or the bailout, the funds to help these economies in such dire straits, that he just said, he just doesn't want it. So moving over to a story in the FT about the EU science chief resigning over the coronavirus response. Another blow to the EU. It's the president of the European Research Council, Mauro Ferrari, resigning because there was a lack of coordinated action amongst the European Union member states over the COVID-19 crisis. I mean, is this another sign of the whole EU project now beginning to crumble at, inside its core? It's not even a peripheral thing. It's like, these or not? Is it just
presumably all of it was a core. We only found out about the fact that there is a core and a periphery after the Greek crisis. And then guess what? Britain is the one that actually left the European Union. Not even, a conversation was all focused on the periphery, and then somebody else left. And then, frankly speaking, I think it's very simple. As long as the cows are fat and the milk is running every day, everybody's happy.
Yeah.
The moment people have to foot in the bill, pitch in, and start to, it's very basic. Surplus countries have to adjust, because they cannot continue to have a similar exchange rate euro with a current account surplus. It's supporting, it's only helping them and not the rest. So they need to adjust. They are not interested in adjusting. They only want the deficit countries to adjust. So it's like a one-way equation. Both of them should be adjusting. Nevertheless, John, I will tell you something. Given the experience of the 10 years, and me, in my opinion, this is a deja vu all over again, as we've been saying that, I'm not at all surprised. And at the same time, I feel that it may actually not even be fair because the way it always is presented is all sorts of bond issuings, like a Eurobond and so on. It shows as if it's Germany or Holland or Austria that are the surplus countries that are going to have to foot in the bill. And they just don't want to do that anymore, or they feel that that is what they're doing. Yeah, it may not even be a reality, but that's their perception. So my suggestion is we are finally at the end of that road. As a matter of fact, we have been at the end of that road a while back, and we surpassed it. Yeah. What we should be doing right now is a complete shift of the paradigm. As you and I talked about it yesterday, a complete shift of the paradigm. We need to figure out different ways by which we will have economic growth and prosperity in countries. And frankly speaking, producing extra debt in a zero and negative interest rate environment, in a slow growth economic environment, in an environment where there are very limited instruments anymore. There are no instruments anymore, frankly speaking. These are just kicking the can down the road for a few more years, or maybe another year and a half or 2 years. So why don't we bite the bullet and basically start from scratch? And we start from scratch by concentrating in the areas where states need to focus more: health, judiciary, lower bureaucracy, property rights, data management. We have gotten into this coronavirus with zero data information, and we continue to not collect good data to figure out how to handle it.
Yeah.
So we should be concentrated in those. And if we want to create a motivation for that to happen, we can start saying that we will eliminate the debt. In other words, you don't really mutualize, you release debt, you release liquidity by cutting debt out, and then you're saying that the money will need to be going also to those sectors. That requires a little more conversation, and it's been work that I've been doing with several other colleagues for a while now. But I would not go knocking on the same doors, wasting energy and time. They just said it twice that they don't want to do it. I swear to you, I feel that they're going to twist it in such a way that it's not going to look good at the end of the day for any recipient of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we just look at this situation in Italy, which has been the hardest hit by the COVID-19 crisis, Professor Ferrari, who's been leading the European Research Council, said, I argued that this was not the time for specific governance to worry excessively about subtleties of the distinctions between bottom-up versus top-down research. And he said that, there hasn't been enough support by the European member states to support Italy at the time of this massive crisis for Italy. And you can see across Italy now, they're taking down the European flags. They're not in any way, positive towards them. They've got a high death toll. Where was the European Union to support one of its most important member states? Where was the European solidarity towards Italy in this crisis? So this kind of underlines the fact that, it kind of, what's the point of the EU, going back to what you're saying, when when everything is good, everything's easy. But when the crisis is hitting, Greece has had it, with the migrants. Italy's now had it with COVID-19. You've had other crises across Europe, and the European Union has failed to act and support its own member states. So then we move over to, when the budget talks start happening and you start, asking member states for contributions, they're going to start saying, why am I even doing this?
See, the last 10 years, we noticed that the infrastructure of the Union, for a variety of reasons, it wasn't necessarily organized like that. The European Union was organized more as to grow into a more of a solidaire kind of like one organization. However, after the withdrawal of Delors, we start seeing that the leaders of the Commission, of the Union, and so on, are trying to wash their hands in terms of taking on responsibilities and move on the responsibilities of the Union and of the Eurozone, and they shift them to the national parliaments of each and every country. At that specific point is when the Eurozone and the European Union is starting to disassemble, because it's completely unfair to request from any national parliament to take a decision of a crisis. It's as if, you would ask the United States of America during the meltdown of right now, during the meltdown that is happening of 4,000 people that were dead over 24 hours last night, right? It's as if Trump is going to be requesting from each and every 50 states to conduct an agreement of their parliamentary, of their congresses, to whether or not they would agree that they're going to be masks sent to New York, or they're going to be plasma tests done in California, which is what happens here. Here we're trying to find out if Germany is going to send masks to Italy, or if others are, or if we even called it a bailout when it was, basic big loan that were given to countries in the Euro crisis.
Yeah.
So I don't see that, unless I don't feel that we will be going anywhere closer. I'm afraid we will be exhausting ourselves. I mean, we're talking about that today when Italy has already gone through the peak of the curve and it starts reducing its level of unfortunately dead people per day.
Yeah.
And what happened in the previous month? Where's everybody?
Yeah. So moving on to our next and final story, there's another story in the FT about Europe watches as countries slowly emerge from lockdown. It's saying that the Czech Republic, Austria, and Denmark have benefited from rapid responses. I think Greece should be in that group as well. I think Greece moved quickly. And it's saying that after a month of tightening lockdowns across Europe to combat coronavirus, Austria, the Czech Republic, and Denmark will in the coming weeks become the first EU countries to loosen restrictions on daily life and business. Their slow exit from lockdown will be carefully watched by others across the continent who will also want to revive economic activity without damaging public health. So, and it's saying here that Denmark has made the most far-reaching changes, saying that this week that kindergarten and primary schools will reopen from April 15th. What's your view on this? In terms of Greece, where is Greece in all this at the moment?
We're a very small country. We have we are like 2% to 2.8% of the GDP of the Eurozone.
Yeah.
So we are tapped in the back. We are congratulated. People are in love with our prime minister. We are happy with him, but yet we are a small country, and I would think we don't want to really promote the good work we have done so far, because God forbid we may be asking for some help for the migrants. We may be asking for some help for our borders.
Right.
I'm afraid that it's not very black and white. But of course, we are not releasing lockdown measures on April 15. We hope to do it sometime in May. But we have done extraordinary work so far to
does that mean that the tourist industry in Greece will have at least an opportunity to kind of operate in kind of June, July onwards if the lockdown starts to come down in Greece? What's your view on that? Do you think tourists
It's not a local issue, it's an international issue, tourism, and it will completely depend on when are we going to open the air flight borders. And because, even China today or Japan, South Korea, their problems are new people coming in and bringing a new wave of coronavirus infection. So we may have contained it for the borders of Greece with, I would say a contained happiness right now, right? We can't relax yet. We need to make sure that we're 100% flattened that curve. But what happens if, suddenly we start having people coming from the US, flying in from wherever, other infected countries? We are 10 million, 11 million people. We receive 30 million people every year.
Yeah. And it's the heavy industry of Greece, tourism. So if this crisis goes into the summer and you haven't got that influx of tourists, which is probably the most likely scenario, that's going to hit the Greek economy massively. I mean, it's going to decimate
they've already talked about pre-registrations of bookings that have given them vouchers for 18 months. It's not just, the tourist business itself, but it's also the transport business related to tourism, which is boats, cruises, restaurants. We're really a service economy around tourism. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be easy.
Well,
We're gonna probably have a tough time for the next till the end of the year.
okay. And in closing, Elena, I just wanted to ask you what are the current conditions in Athens? What's life like in Athens for everyday people? How do you guys live at the moment?
Well, I was listening to your question. I haven't really been able to go outside of Athens except for 2 times. It's very, I don't know if you recall if you have ever seen old Italian, black and white Italian and Greek movies, where it was somewhere around the 60s or late 50s, early 60s, where people would walk in the streets and you look at these movies and you say, wait a minute, it was only 5 people walking in that street. It feels a little bit like that, yeah? It's like one person, you hear the heels of your own shoes walking in the middle of Syntagma Square. You hear your own breath. There are probably 1 or 2 cars. The metro is not stopped, the buses are still running. The unfortunate part is that it's really Easter time, so that's very, it's associated with spring, and it's very outdoory and associated with churches and bells and stuff, and that is not happening now because churches have closed. So it's odd. It's odd. It's very reclusive, and it's I would say it's rather cathartic. It's interesting. People are more sober in themselves.
Yeah. Well, on that point, Elena, thank you very much for your contribution today, and we'll speak to you very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was Elena Panaritis from Athens, a former World Bank economist, giving her take on today's big stories. And that will be our last interview for the day. We've got one interview coming out this evening and a live broadcast of a paraklesis from the Greek Orthodox Church of St. Anargyros in Highgate. That will be at 5 p.m. UK time on live on YouTube. And thank you very much for everyone who's been watching.